I'm an anarchist. I don't make rules for other people. I make rules for myself. And it's also a kind of penance for what I saw and felt when I was in Korea, and that's where we started, isn't it?
Utah Phillips, we're talking in an election year, perhaps one of the most important election years ever. But you once ran for election.
Once? Oh, yeah, well, several. Okay, I ran for the U.S. Senate in 1968 on the Peace and Freedom ticket. Took a leave of absence from state service. I was a state archivist. And ran a full campaign, 27 counties. We took 6,000 votes in Utah. But when it was over, my job had vanished and I couldn't get work anymore in Utah. So I hung on for about a year, living on a cot in the back of a warehouse, keeping a little draft resistance center going. And of course, by that time, we were dealing with deserters that didn't want to go back to Nam rather than, resistors. And did some work with the Utah Migrant Council. Started the Joe Hill House again because Ammon had moved to Phoenix because he was too old to run it. Finally, I just run out of moves. I couldn't find work, and that's when friends like Rosalie Sorrell suggested I leave Utah and try to make a living telling stories and singing songs, which seemed criminal or somehow unthinkable in Utah. But that's when I went out and discovered this whole world.
So you were an archivist in Utah? I
was an archivist, yeah. I handled 75,000 cubic feet of public records. And for an information junkie, that's heaven. Yeah, I loved the studying archival science, and I still have a library in my home that I curate my own little research library of popular antiquities, and that's where my mind lives when I'm at home.
I've been speaking with librarians who are very concerned that the country's archives are now being transferred to the internet, and they're afraid from there that they will then be vacuumed, that the internet can then be changed, as we've seen President Bush, purging words like global warming from government websites.
Archival science is in a serious crisis, and that's because of electronic media, electronic storage and retrieval. A lot of hotshot, fancy, high-tech salesmen have gone to a lot of archivists and archivists and sold them some bogus hardware and software. How many books has the Library of Congress lost? Millions of books, because the images have vanished. Whatever the storage system is, electronic storage system is, it's degraded to the point where the stuff's no longer usable. In the Utah State Archives, the best and most durable records are on paper from the 1800s, the old Mormon governor Brigham Young's papers. Why? Because there was potassium in the water they used to make the paper in their own mill, and that's a natural paper preservative, And that's true, I think, of any archive in the country. You talk to the archive, they'll say the most durable resource they have is still on paper. Well, what's the shelf life of the life of a CD? Is it about 10 years, 10, 12 years? Congress won't accept tape for archival purposes because after, 10, 15 years it bleeds through, you see? Paper. LPs, and I have over 150 John McCormick 78s from the early 1900s. He's my favorite singer, John McCormick, and I can play those and listen to those. Same with my LPs. The whole information is becoming more and more temporary. And you're absolutely right. It is terribly threatening to every archive to be bullied by technocrats into going that route.
So are you going to be voting this year? Are you going to be endorsing anyone? What do you think is the most important form of participation these days?
Well, now you've got me boxed in. Amy, you ever made a vow? Like Catholics make vows, don't they? You make a vow of celibacy or a vow of poverty. I made a vow to Ammon Hennessy, shortly before his death, that you know, he would never, he was an anarchist, a great anarchist, and he would never speak when I was running for the Senate. He would never talk, you know, for me. He said, "Another, you learn things the hard way, don't you?" He made me promise that I wouldn't engage in systemic politics ever again, that there was another way. I had to do this. Ammon never went to the polls, but you couldn't tell him he hadn't voted. He did vote. Ammon's body was his ballot, and he cast it in behalf of the poor around him every day of his life, and he paid a terrible price for that. And you couldn't tell him he hadn't voted. He said, "Yes, I did vote. I just didn't assign responsibility to other people to do things. I accepted responsibility and saw to it that something got done." It's a different way of looking at voting, isn't it? And you can do that all the time, every day of your life. And that's the way I live my life. My body is my ballot. It's a lesson I learned from Ammon. That's my way. And that's the vow I took, and I'm not going to break it. All right? Given that, I can, of course, ask people to do something that I wouldn't do, you know. But it does appear to me that these fascists that have taken over we've got to get rid of them. They're not Republicans and they're not Democrats up there. You know, they're something else. They're corporate fascists. And they got to be out of there. And the only organized force on the planet in the country that I know of that can do that is the Democratic Party. God help us all. You know, it's like buying a seat on the Titanic, the Democratic Party, but they're the only force, organized force, that has the ability to do it. So it's imperative that the entire progressive movement come together, like they did in the Great Depression at the time of the CIO. Every progressive force in the country came together, given the window of opportunity, Roosevelt's second term, and put their differences on the shelves, stopped hammering on each other. In the Great Depression, and we came out of that with Social Security and workman's compensation and minimum wage. You understand? The whole progressive movement, from animal rights to the feminist movement to anti-nuclear, I don't care what permutation, have got to saying this is my issue, and join forces and once again create the united front, totally united front, and take over the Democratic Party, and that's the only way we're going to be able to do this, to pull this off. We can't do that. Then when we've done it, go back and hammer on each other, okay? But for right now, all the differences have got to be pushed aside. I'm absolutely appalled at these Democratic candidates hammering on each other, you know, not recognizing the direness of our situation. It is long since those people should have sat down in a room together and decided which one could be elected and put everything they had into that person. That's time has long since passed. They've got to do it. And otherwise, we're in for very, very much more serious times than we've got now. It's not that time has run out. It's going to make it a lot harder on everybody else to try to make it better.
Legendary folk musician Utah Phillips in 2004. He died this weekend in Nevada City, California. The memorial service will be held on Sunday. The family requests donations go to Hospitality House in Grass Valley, hospitalityhouse.org. I'll be speaking in Grass Valley Friday night. Special thanks to Elizabeth Presh, Rifa Bogadus, Hani Massoud, Aaron Mate, Steve Martinez, Nicole Salazar. If you'd like a copy of today's show, go to democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.